Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm talking about some disappointing reads, some unpopular opinions. Basically, I'm talking about books that BookTube made me read and that I was super disappointed in. These are all books that I've given 2 stars. They are not 1-star books because I didn't find them like terrible, like absolutely horrible. I don't understand why anyone would read them, like offensive. So these books are just books that were very disappointing. I didn't like them, even though I was kind of expecting to, because either booktubers were really excited and hyped them up, or they were something that I was really interested in because of the subject matter or whatever, and they just were very disappointing. So without further ado, let's get into some very disappointing reads that BookTube made me read. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. Let me try to just give you the setup for this book. So it's about a girl named Ashley Cordova who was found dead. Though it's ruled as a suicide, there's an investigative journalist who decides to investigate further because he suspects otherwise. What he finds is that she is the daughter of a kind of cult horror film director, I think. Yeah, he's a director. And he hasn't been seen in public for over 30 years. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. Kind of mystery, kind of dark, gothic, noir kind of feel. And let me tell you, I hated this book. I am somebody who needs character development as well as a good plot. I cannot take one or the other. I need both of them. This book I found had 0 character development and nothing happens. So basically throughout the book we learn about the father's like weird movies and his estate and like weird things that have happened, and just like it's weird, he's weird. Ashley, his daughter, who was the woman who was found dead, had some just weird experiences that we find out about. I think the investigative journalist, I think he teams up with one of Ashley's old boyfriends. That's the book, you know. You're basically just trying to figure out what happens, trying to figure out if the father's still alive because he hasn't been seen for 30 years. And so nothing happens in this book. It was very just weird, and not like a good weird that like led to something, because it didn't. Let me tell you this also, because I'm a person who loves an ambiguous ending. I don't need to be told what specifically happens at the ending of a book, because sometimes I prefer to just be like left up to the reader to interpret. But if nothing happens in the book and then you are given an ambiguous ending, I felt it was such a cop-out. It felt to me like lazy writing, and I could not stand it. This book is over 600 pages. I read the whole thing because I'm like, something's got to happen in the end. Nothing happens in the end. So I was very disappointed in this book, and the fact that so many people love it and are still talking about it, my mind is just like, what? No, this book was terrible. And so she has another book, I think it's called like Neverworld Wake. I'm just like, I'm not gonna read it. I know that it's like completely different, but I'm not gonna read it because this book was such a letdown. No, this book was not good. I do not recommend it. Another book that I had just seen all over the place, all over BookTube. Everyone was reading it, everyone was talking about it, everyone was talking about the audiobook, and that was Sadie by Courtney Summers. So the setup of this book is about a girl named Sadie who her sister is found dead, and then basically the book is about Sadie trying to figure out what happened, and more about her sister's death and a man that she thinks has a lot to do with it. She uncovers some things, blah, blah, blah. It's also like back and forth with a like, podcast, and I hated this book so much. First of all, the podcast was very distracting because the accents were just really obnoxious to me. I felt like they were trying too hard. With the plot of the book and Sadie doing all of this stupid stuff, like she's a teenager, to me was firstly unbelievable. Like, I don't believe that any teenager could get away with any of this stuff. Secondly, like, the whole reason that she's doing this is because her sister, who she had taken care of her entire life, is found dead, and so we're meant to believe that Sadie loves her sister so much that she's like basically going after the guy who killed her, right? I did not feel like there was 1 ounce of love between Sadie and her sister the entire book. It kind of flashes back. Sadie like talks about some, or thinks like of some memories of her raising her sister, and I'm just like, but you hate your sister. Like, there's no love between them. And it was very unbelievable that Sadie would do all of this stuff for somebody she didn't love. And then finally, the big twist with the book is just something that I just don't like to read about. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you are easily triggered by things, I would recommend looking up this book if you decide to read it. Honestly, when that twist happened, I was just like, oh. I mean, I get that like these things do happen in real life. It's just not something I want to read about, and I wasn't expecting it. I felt like, well, okay, so my sister, like, we read it for our personal book club, but my sister said that she felt that it was coming, like, she wasn't surprised at all, but I was kind of just like, but it could have been so many other things, and they went with that. So, I was very disappointed in this book, disappointed in the audiobook, don't like it, gave it 2 stars, don't recommend it. Courtney Summers' newest book is about a cult, and that is a little bit more interesting to me, so I might read that book, but I do not recommend Sadie at all. The next book was kind of influenced by Gabby Reeds. She just talks about this book all the time as her favorite Stephen King novel, and that is Pet Sematary. And I kind of go back and forth, although right now I'm pretty adamant about how much I hate Stephen King. Like, I'm not going to read any more of his books. I feel like Pet Sematary was like my last try to give him, you know, another chance. And after reading Pet Sematary, I'm just like, he doesn't deserve it. If you don't know anything about Pet Sematary, it's kind of hard to explain. I think you can kind of get the vibe of like, it's a Stephen King novel and there's a Pet Sematary horror. Okay, so I'm not going to say any more than that, but this book was like, what, 500 pages? Yeah, it's over 500 pages, and nothing happens until like the last 50 pages, so I was really bored. There was 0 character development. I don't think like Stephen King really cares about character development, and I think that's a problem I think with a lot of horror. It's not really about building characters, so maybe that's not even something I should think about, but I was not at all interested in any of the characters. The old guy in it who's like telling the father like all of the things about Pet Sematary, like, he was interesting and his stories were interesting, but again, they weren't really about him. So that was disappointing. And then the ending I hated. It was boring, and then the ending happened and I was just like, whatever. This, to me, it was poorly written, not a good book, and I don't understand why people like it. And then watched the newest adaptation afterwards, which again, like, the only reason I watched it because the lead actor, I really like him, but I can't think of what his name is. But anyway, not for me, and probably just set me over to the fact that I'm just like, Stephen King is not the type of person that I want to support because of the things that he uses in his books. His books are not also that good, so not interested in reading anymore. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day I'll read like The Stand or something, but Pet Sematary was so bad. Do not recommend it. Can't say that I would ever recommend any of Stephen King's books, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, really was disappointed in that, and I'm just like really, like, I want to have like an in-depth review from people who say they love it so much, because I'm just like, why? What about this book do you love? Because I can't think of a single thing. Not a single thing. The next book is pretty much an author that I feel like every booktuber loves. I don't think I've seen a single booktuber say they don't like this author. So, Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Gave this book 2 stars. The setup was interesting, I guess. So it's about a woman who's like down on her luck. She needs money and she sees this ad for an apartment sitter in this really fancy apartment building. And basically she just gets paid to live in an apartment, which kind of just like, really? That doesn't seem like a real thing. I like the explanation for it kind of was dumb, and I don't know, like, I mean, I get it. Like, if I were in the woman's situation, I would have been like, heck yes, give me that money. But while she's living there, people start going missing, and she is trying to figure out the woman who was in the apartment next to her, like, what happened to her, and she just feels like something's not right. And I mean, like, to me, that'd be like a signal, like, get the fuck out of there. But no, she stays. And then she kind of starts this relationship with one of the other people who live in the apartment, and she has sex with him, and I thought it was really dumb. And then, I don't want to spoil it, but I think if you read this, you know what I'm talking about, the person who she sleeps with, and I'm just like, I hated it. Hated it. And then the big twist happens, like, what the whole thing that's, you know, creepy and unsettling, and what, you know, is the reason for this book and whatnot, and I was so pissed. I just felt like it was dumb, it was overdone. I was like, why is this getting so much attention? Like, I don't understand, because I felt like it was overdone, and just did not enjoy it. When I read it, I kind of like rolled my eyes and I was like, whatever. And then the very ending, the woman, the main character, her end scene, I was like, whatever. Like, this book, I did not believe a single thing in this book. Like, this would not happen. I hate Riley Sager for the sex scene, and I'm not gonna, I keep going back and forth about reading his other books, but I've heard so many bad things that I'm just like, probably just gonna, like, just skip all of those. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in being disappointed anymore by stupid freaking twists. Oh my god, I was so pissed off. I'm still pissed off at it. It was just so dumb to me. I just didn't like it. But I'm pretty picky about thrillers, probably because I watch so much Criminal Minds that, like, I want something to wow me, something to be really, like, Lock Every Door to me is one of those, like, filler episodes of Criminal Minds where they're just kind of like, they need to add more episodes and they come up with this. That's kind of what it felt like to me. And I was just like, whatever. Whatever. So, don't recommend. BookTube made me read this book and I'm not okay with it. So, unpopular opinion, I hated Lock Every Door. The next book is not one that I hated, but one that was really disappointing. Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Young. I felt like there was so much hype in this book because it was a great fantasy. There was a sapphic romance, and it was not like a Western fantasy, not written by a white person. So, like, yeah, I was like, heck yes, let's read this. And it doesn't make sense. There's just so many things in this book that I'm just like, no, that would not happen. That's not real. No one would do that. It doesn't make sense. No. That, closer to the ending, one of the kind of like plot twists that forces our main character to do something. I was like, psh, no. No way. And then, like, there was so little world building that I felt like I was missing something. So I'm hoping that it gets fixed in the second book. I understand, like, in the first book, like, it's such like a microcosm of the world because for the majority of the book they're at the king's palace and they don't go outside of the palace. So I understand why we wouldn't be getting as much, but I feel like there should have been more. Just like the way that, like, the magic system works and, like, the type of people and creatures that are in this book, I felt like there needed to be more explanation and more world building. So it was kind of just a letdown. The sapphic romance was kind of, I don't want to call it insta-love because I don't think that they were in love at the end. It was kind of just like insta-lust and nothing happens. So I was disappointed in that. I didn't feel like they had any chemistry. It kind of feels like to me, if this were like a real life story and they were forced into this relationship because of the trauma that they're going through as, like, basically prostitutes for the king, after they were freed or whatever, they would not be together. Like, their trauma would keep them together there, but would ultimately, like, destroy their relationship. I don't know. I'm thinking, like, way too into this. Their romance barely just started. Maybe it'll develop more in the second book. But yeah, it was very disappointing. I felt like BookTube hyped this up so much. So many people were just like, oh, this book is fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Like, some people, like, whose reviews I trust gave this book 5 stars. I gave it 2, so I was just really disappointed in this book and the lack of development, because this book is 400 pages and nothing happens. Another book that I was very disappointed in was the Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. I do feel like a lot of booktubers were really pushing this when it came out. I'm sorry about like the lighting here, if that distracts you, I'm sorry. When did this book come out? It came out in 2018, and I felt like it was being pushed, and I absolutely loved the sound of it because it's like fairy tale retelling, whimsical, and this is exactly the book that I want. And I gave this book 3 stars, so I didn't hate it. But what I really didn't like about this book was the ending. So basically it's about this girl who's the granddaughter of this famous author who wrote this like really popular book that's kind of obscure, but a lot of people know about it, and like you can't find any copies of it anywhere. But it's books from the hinterland, or stories from the hinterland, and she's kind of like a cult author, like people are just, I don't know. And so when her mother goes missing, our main character, and like a boy comes and finds our main character, whose name is Alice, by the way, and kind of like try to figure out about the hinterland and about the grandmother and was it real, blah blah blah, and they find out some things, they go to a place, and I hated the way this book ended. I was just like, it set up for a romance. If you don't know me, like, I love fantasy, but I love fantasy even more if there's a romance in it. So this book set up this strong romance, and then it didn't happen, and it really pissed me off. So it's just like, nope, sorry. Not for me. Not going to read the next book in the series because I do not give a freaking shit about what happens next. The only thing that I would read, she has a book that I think either came out this year or will come out this year. That's like a collection of stories from the hinterland, and I was just like, that sounds nice. Like, I will read that fairy tale book, but I don't care a single thing about what happens to Alice and her mother and her grandmother. I don't care. I don't care. Another book that I felt like was hyped to the max from BookTube, and it really got me excited. The description got me excited. I was so looking forward to this book. That was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I gave this book 2 stars. This book, let me give you the setup. It is about a girl, Addie LaRue, who in the 1600s is about to be forced into an arranged marriage, and she doesn't want it. She wants to be free. And so she runs away into the forest, into the darkness, and tries to make a deal with anyone who's listening. She wants her freedom. She'll do anything for it. And the darkness answers, and they make a deal that he will take her soul once she is ready to give it, and he gives her her freedom. Basically, she finds out that she's gonna live for as long as she wants until she decides to give him her soul, but the catch is that nobody ever remembers her. So her family doesn't remember her, and she lives for years, like 300 years, and then the main plot of the story happens in, I think, 2014, where she finally meets someone who does remember her. So when this book was hyped, it was hyped as a love story between the devil and Addie LaRue. And I was like, heck yes, I'm for that, because like I said, I love fantasy, but I love it even more when there's romance. So I was really excited for that. And then I heard some other people that were just like, it's not really that. And so like that kind of like, I felt like lowered my expectations, which was a good thing, but I was still like hoping for a romance because everyone's like, this is a romance. This is a romance. And so just like, okay, we'll see what happens. So I'm reading this book, and first of all, I hate the writing style. So many people that I've seen talk about this book rave and rant and just go on and on about the writing style, and let me tell you, I hated it. To me, it felt like V.E. Schwab was trying so hard to be whimsical that it came off really fake to me. It was overdone, dramatic, and I hated it. There are specific parts of the book that mainly happen in our other character, the boy that she meets who remembers her. His name is Henry. In his point of view, there were specific writing decisions, style decisions that she made that I hated. And let me tell you, I wrote all through this book. I would go and grab it, but it's out there and I don't feel like it, but I wrote all through this book underlying things that I hated. Things are like, well, this is okay, but this is not. So I was really upset by this book, the fact that it was hyped so much and it was such a disappointment. I guess I would say the main reason that this book was disappointing was that Addie LaRue is the same beginning to end. She lives for 300 years and never changes. She lives through major historical events like World Wars I and II, but never changes. And then I felt like what would have made this book more interesting to me, there are a few flashbacks where she like talks about like her time in other like historical times with different places, like well, she lives in France, like that's where she grows up, and so she goes to Paris, and I think there's at one point they're in Italy, and just like those chapters were so interesting to me, and I would have loved for this story to be more about that. The devil, the darkness that makes this deal with Addie LaRue was probably my favorite character and the most developed, and even saying that he was not developed very much, like still lacked in development. And then the ending I absolutely hated. To me, like, if you live 300 years, I feel like you should come to terms with the darkness of the world, and hopefully not be vengeful. So I hated the end of the book. I am still glad that I read this book though, and I'm really interested to see if I read it a couple years from now and see if my perspective changes. So we'll see what happens. Definitely disappointed in this book. BookTube really disappointed me with this book. The last book I want to talk about, probably the most disappointing book on this list, was a book that I was really excited for because it was the sequel to a book that I read I think in 2019 that I absolutely adored, gave it 5 stars. And so I, who do not finish series, decided to pick this one up. The first one was Serpent and Dove. The second one was Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahern, I think the author's name is. So the basic premise of the series is that witches are seen as evil, and so there are these kind of clergymen, they're called chasers, who are witch hunters basically. And there are good witches, obviously, because, people, human beings. But there's one witch who's like the most evil of them all, who's trying to destroy the king's line, his heir, like, so that the king's line will end. And she wants to do it by killing her daughter. So this is the premise of the book. The first book is heavily like fantasy romance. Like I said, fantasy romance, that is my thing. That is what I want. Okay, and so I loved the first book. I loved where it went. The ending was like shocking and surprising, and I was like, I'm ready for the second book. And let me tell you, this was the most disappointing book, I think. Okay, this is the most disappointing sequel I've ever read. Nothing happens in this book for like the first 400 pages. It was just a bunch of filler to me. I almost felt like the ending made up for it when we learn about there's a new character who's introduced, and we learn more about him, and I absolutely loved that part. I was like, yes, this fixes this book. This makes it so much better. And then the ending happened. The last chapter, the last page, and it pisses me off so much. I was so angry, so upset that it was affecting my mood, and I wanted everyone else to be angry with me. This book also, first one being heavily fantasy romance, this book was a continuation of the story between our two main characters, Lou and Reed, who, witch and witch hunter, kind of like enemies to lovers. And I was so excited to see where their relationship went in the second book, and let me tell you, it went nowhere. The entire book, they were like, oh, I killed blah blah blah, I did this, she must hate me, I hate myself, but I love her. And, he must hate me, and I hate myself, and I hate him, but I love him. And that was the entire book until the last like 50 pages where they make up and they decide that they're going to, push through, and that they are going to have a strong relationship and tell each other everything and be honest with each other. And I was like, yes. And then the ending fucking happened, and I was so freaking pissed. Oh God. I'm not reading the third book. This is the reason I don't finish series, because when I love a book so much, the first book, I'm terrified that the second book is going to absolutely ruin it, and that's what this book did. I hated this book. The only reason I gave it 2 stars is because of that one character, the new character, who we learn a lot more about at the ending. I loved that. That part of the book was like the best part of this book. That's the only reason I gave this book 2 stars. If that character was not in this book, I would have given it 1 star. I would have thrown it across the room, burned it. No, I'm just kidding. It was a library book. This book was such a disappointment to me. I can't say that BookTube really hyped this book up. They did hype Serpent and Dove, so that's good that I loved that book, but I think I saw maybe Emma from Emma Books recently read this in a vlog, and from her reaction I was expecting it to be good, and I hated it. And this is definitely like a personal thing. Some people might really love the way this book went. I'm not saying like it's bad writing, I hated it. So probably the most disappointing book that I've ever read. Maybe. This is like one of my all-time favorite books, There in the Nightingale. Came out 2015, 2016, and it's a trilogy. The second and third books are done. They've been out for a couple of years now, and I refuse to read them because I love the first book so much that I think that the second and third books would ruin it. Although I did buy them and I'm going to read them, I'm terrified. This is the reason I don't finish series. So anyone out there who's just like, oh, you should finish the series that we started reading, no. I don't want to, because it'll be ruined and I'll be upset. Like, this book upset me so much that I was just like, I want to forget this book. I want it to be completely wiped from my memory because it was such a disappointing book, and I'm not reading the third book. This is a series I will not finish, and I'm really upset about it. I don't recommend it. If you're into fantasy romance, don't read this book. And that's it. So those are my strong opinions, unpopular opinions about books that BookTube made me read that I really was just so disappointed in. I'm curious what you think about these books, if you read them, if you loved them. Tell me why. Like Night Film, for example. If you liked that book, I need to know why, because I don't understand how you could. So please, let's have a discussion in the comments. Let me know what you think about these books, and yeah. Tell me some other books that you felt were really hyped and were really disappointed. Books that BookTube made you read and you are very disappointed in them. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and my strong opinions. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in a new video soon. Bye!